Imagine waking up one morning, the sun is streaming through the blinds, and you go to stretch.
Right, just a normal morning.
Exactly, a totally normal morning. But then you realize your arm just simply no longer listens to you.
Oh, man, yeah.
Like it's attached to your body. It is entirely yours, but the connection is it's completely severed.
It's a terrifying feeling, I imagine.
It really is. Simple things, right? Like reaching for a glass of water on the nightstand or buttoning your shirt or even just gently holding someone's hand.
Yeah, suddenly impossible.
Impossibly out of reach.
Right.
And this is the frustrating, often completely terrifying reality of acute stroke hemiplegia.
Right.
You are suddenly living in a body that feels like it has, I don't know, just stopped speaking your language entirely.
Well, in the immediate aftermath of an acute stroke, it leaves patients in a highly vulnerable state, obviously.
Physically and mentally, yeah.
Physically, but also neurologically, right?
Yeah.
Because the brain has sustained localized tissue death.
Right.
And the road back to independence can feel incredibly long. For a long time, the medical community didn't really have a clear roadmap for how to forcibly restart that communication, between the brain and the paralyzed limb.
Well, and that roadmap is exactly what we are exploring in this deep dive today.
Yes.
We are looking at a layman's blog post about stroke recovery, but we're pairing it with its grounding source, this really foundational 1998 randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled study.
A very rigorous piece of science.
Right. Published in the American Heart Association journal, Stroke, by Dr. John Shea and his colleagues.
Yeah, it's a classic.
So we are going to explore how gentle electrical currents can literally help rewire a damaged brain. And we'll look at why the medical gold standard of testing actually revealed a crazy paradox in how we measure recovery.
That's my favorite part of this whole study.
It's wild. And we'll talk about what this means for you or a loved one if you're navigating rehabilitation today. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it. So, to understand the sheer ambition of that 1998 Cleveland study, we have to look at the fundamental biological hurdle of stroke recovery.
Right, the core problem.
Exactly. The scientific community already understood neuroplasticity by the late 90s. We knew the brain has this incredible capacity to remap itself after an injury.
Right, it shifts functions from the damaged tissue over to healthy, undamaged areas.
Yes. It's essentially Hebbian learning.
Which is that old neuroscience rule, right? Like neurons that fire together, wire together.
That is exactly it. That's the core mechanism. But here's the catch. To drive that remapping, to get them to fire together, the brain requires a continuous, active sensory motor feedback loop.
Okay, meaning what, practically?
It means the affected arm actually needs repetitive movement. When the arm moves, the muscle spindles stretch, and they send proprioceptive data, but basically sensory feedback, back up the spinal cord to the brain.
Right, it's telling the brain, hey, I'm moving.
Exactly. And then the brain receives that signal, matches it with its own attempt to send a motor command down, and then it begins reinforcing a totally new neural pathway.
But wait, that introduces like the ultimate physiological catch-22, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Because if the stroke has left your arm completely weak or, paralyzed, you physically cannot perform the active movement that's required to generate that sensory feedback.
Right, you're stuck.
It's like, it's like trying to jumpstart a car with a dead battery, but the mechanic tells you, well, you need the car already running in order to charge the battery.
That is a perfect analogy. You need the movement to rewire the brain, but you need the rewired brain to generate the movement.
So how do you break that impossible loop?
Well, it creates this closed loop of paralysis. Like, think of the brain as a city.
Okay.
And a stroke destroys the main bridge to the arm. You can't just wait for the bridge to magically rebuild itself. You need construction crews.
Right.
But the only way to get the crews there is over the bridge that no longer exists.
So you have to start building from the other side of the river.
Exactly.
Right.
And that is where neuromuscular stimulation comes into play, or EMS.
Right, EMS.
The researchers hypothesized that, hey, if the brain can't send the electrical signal down the spinal cord to fire the muscle, what if we just supply that electricity externally?
Like right at the muscle itself.
Right. What's fascinating here is, by applying surface electrodes directly to the skin over specific muscles, EMS pushes a small electrical current right through the tissue.
And that artificially fires the nerve.
Yes, it depolarizes the motor nerve, which forces the muscle fibers to contract, so it artificially creates that smooth, repetitive movement.
Even though the person isn't moving it themselves.
Exactly. The paralyzed arm moves, and that generates that crucial sensory data, which then travels back up those afferent nerve pathways to the brain.
And the brain registers the movement, which finally breaks that catch-22.
Precisely. You jumpstart the car.
Theory's cheap, though. I mean, proving that external electricity can actually drive neuroplasticity in a human being who just suffered a massive neurological event, that's an entirely different thing.
It is. It's a huge leap from theory to practice.
And that is what the team at Metro Health Medical Center in Cleveland, which is part of Case Western Reserve University, that's what they set out to prove in '98.
Right, and the methodology they designed for this was incredibly rigorous. They didn't just take anyone. They focused specifically on acute stroke survivors.
Acute meaning recent.
Yes, these were patients who were strictly within a 4-week window post-stroke.
Oh, wow. So really fresh. Why that specific window?
Because that timing is critical. During this early acute phase, the brain is essentially bathed in this neurochemical soup.
Okay.
Inflammation is starting to subside, neurotrophic factors are peaking, and the cortex is just highly, highly malleable.
So it's like the absolute optimal window for reorganization.
Exactly. If you want to remap a brain, that's when you do it.
So the researchers take these subjects and they put them through a 15-session intervention, right?
Yeah, doing about 1 hour of therapy a day.
And they set this up as a double-blind, placebo-controlled trial. So the treatment group got real surface stimulation.
Right, and they specifically targeted the extensor digitorum communis and the extensor carpi radialis in the forearm.
Okay, those are big words. Which muscles are those practically?
Fair enough. Basically, they're the muscles that control wrist extension, lifting the wrist up and finger opening.
Oh, okay. Why those specific ones?
It was a very deliberate choice. For stroke survivors, the flexor muscles, the ones that clench your fist, those tend to become really hyperactive and spastic.
Oh, so they're tightly clenched.
Exactly. Getting the hand to open, to actually release an object, is notoriously one of the hardest motor functions to recover.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
So the EMS device, it was programmed to this really strict biological rhythm, right?
Yeah, 10 seconds on, 10 seconds off.
So 10 seconds of stimulation to force the hand to open and the wrist to lift.
Right, and then 10 seconds of nothing, just letting it relax.
Over an hour. That's got to be a ton of reps.
It creates a perfect, high-volume, repetitive practice loop. And because the machine is doing the driving, it doesn't exhaust the patient physically.
Okay, so that's the treatment group. But to control for the placebo effect, the control group had identical electrodes put on their arms.
Yeah, the setup looked exactly the same.
But the machine was calibrated to only deliver, like, a mild tingling sensation.
Right, just right at the sensory threshold. So they felt a little buzz, it felt like a medical treatment, but it didn't push enough current to actually depolarize the motor nerve.
So their muscles stayed completely still. No movement.
Exactly. No movement, no sensory feedback loop.
Now, bias is a massive risk here, right? Especially when you're assessing human movement. Like, neither the patients nor the therapists assessing them knew who was getting the real treatment.
Right, that's the double-blind part.
But how do you objectively score something as complex as movement without personal bias creeping in? You know, like a therapist just wanting their patient to do well.
It's a huge issue in rehab science. It's incredibly subjective to look at a patient and say, well, they seem to be moving a little better today.
Right.
So to strip that out, the researchers essentially had to use 2 completely different measuring sticks. They relied on 2 distinct, highly validated scoring systems.
Okay, what was the first one?
The first was the Fugl-Meyer motor assessment.
The Fugl-Meyer.
Yeah, and this test isolates the mechanics of the limb. It is strict. The therapist asks the patient to perform highly specific, isolated joint movements.
Like what?
Like, can you extend this one specific finger? Or can you flex this wrist to a certain degree without moving your shoulder to compensate?
Oh, I see. So it's a very micro-level view of neurological recovery.
Exactly. Pure mechanics.
And the second test?
But the second test they used was the functional independence measure, or the FAMA, specifically the self-care component of it.
Okay, so if the other one is micro, this one is macro.
Exactly. It doesn't care about isolated joints. It looks at overall daily life activities. Can you feed yourself? Can you button a shirt? Can you manage your own hygiene?
So you have the strict mechanical test on one side, the Fugl-Meyer.
Right.
And then the practical daily life test on the other, the FEM.
Yes. And after 15 days of this targeted electrical stimulation, the results from those two tests, they revealed a profound measurement paradox.
It completely changes how you view clinical data, honestly.
It really does.
So, looking at the Fugl-Meyer scores, the mechanical test, the data is staggering. The group that got the real EMS showed significantly greater gains in actual arm and hand movement.
Massive gains. Right after the 15 sessions, the Fugl-Meyer gain for the EMS group was 13.1.
And the placebo group.
They only gained 6.5.
Wow, so the external electricity literally doubled the mechanical recovery compared to the control group.
It did. But what makes that data point so significant is the longevity of the effect.
Right, because this wasn't just like a temporary muscle pump from the electrical current.
No, not at all. The researchers tracked these patients well beyond the initial intervention. 4 weeks after the treatment ended, the EMS group maintained a score of 17.9.
Versus what for the placebo?
Just 9.7.
And even 12 weeks later, like 3 months out from the therapy, they were still holding this massive lead, right? It was 20.6 versus 11.2.
Yes. The brain had fundamentally held on to the rewiring.
The artificial bridge construction actually worked.
Exactly. The new neural pathways were permanently established. The biological mechanism was completely proven.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Because when you look at that secondary metric, the FEMIN, the self-care test, the entire narrative completely collapses.
It's so counterintuitive. Despite these massive, statistically proven, long-lasting gains in actual mechanical arm movement.
The FEM scores showed absolutely no significant difference between the two groups.
None. The p-value was greater than 0.10. Statistically, there was zero difference in their actual ability to perform daily tasks.
Which is wild. How is it physically possible that a patient's arm works twice as well mechanically, but that improvement is entirely invisible when they try to put on a shirt?
Right. It seems impossible, but it actually comes down to human psychology and our innate drive for survival.
Okay, break that down for me.
Well, the FIM measures general disability and independence, right?
Right.
If the test asks, did the patient get their shirt on, the clinician scores them based on the completion of that task.
The end result.
Yes. The test does not mandate how the task is completed.
So a stroke survivor with a severely weakened arm isn't going to, spend 20 minutes struggling to force their paralyzed limb through a sleeve if they don't have to.
Exactly. They adapt. We are incredibly adaptable creatures. They learn single-handed compensatory techniques.
So they just use their fully functional arm to dress themselves, feed themselves, and just survive.
Right. They hack the task. And the FEM doesn't penalize a patient for hacking the task.
Right. If you successfully button your shirt using only your good hand, you still achieve a high score on the FEM.
Exactly. The patients in both the EMS group and the placebo group were simply using their healthy arms to accomplish the self-care activities.
So the test that is literally designed to measure their independence was completely blind to the specific physiological healing of the damaged limb.
Yes, because human beings are just too good at adapting.
Which is crazy to think about from a research perspective.
It has massive implications. I mean, in the clinical community, tests like the FEMR are often used by insurance companies to determine if a therapy is effective.
And whether it's worth paying for.
Exactly. So if a trial relies solely on these general independence metrics, highly effective interventions like EMS could just be deemed failures.
Just because the test wasn't granular enough to capture the actual mechanical victory happening in the arm.
Right. And the researchers explicitly noted this in their paper. They said future studies have to use limb-specific functional outcome measures, so these critical neurological improvements aren't missed.
Okay, but we also have to do a bit of a reality check on the intervention itself, right? Because looking at the raw data in the 1998 study.
Yeah, the dropouts.
Yeah. The researchers started with 46 enrolled acute stroke patients, but only 28 actually completed the trial. 18 people dropped out.
Right. And a high attrition rate like that is always a red flag in a clinical trial. It has to be interrogated.
Well, and when you isolate the 11 people who dropped out of the active EMS treatment group, 7 of them quit specifically because of pain.
Yes, pain or discomfort from the surface stimulation.
Which is a huge deal. I mean, if the treatment hurts too much to use, how practical is this really? It doesn't matter how well it drives neuroplasticity if nearly half your test group taps out because they can't tolerate it.
That is a very fair point, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, the researchers were highly transparent about this limitation.
Because it was the 90s, right?
Right. In 1998, surface EMS technology relied on relatively crude waveforms. to get the electrical current through the skin, through the subcutaneous fat, and all the way down into the motor nerve.
They had to really crank it up.
They did. They had to push a significant amount of brute force current.
And that hurts.
For a large percentage of patients, it caused this harsh stinging or burning sensation right at the skin level that was simply intolerable.
It's essentially delivering a constant low-grade electrical shock.
It really was. The authors even suggested in their discussion that future research might need to pivot to alternative techniques like percutaneous stimulation.
Percutaneous, what does that mean?
It involves threading microscopic wires directly under the skin, right into the muscle tissue.
Oh, wow, so it bypasses the skin entirely.
Exactly, to bypass the pain receptors on the surface and minimize the dropout rate.
Okay, so the 1998 study provides the foundational biological proof, but obviously the landscape of the technology has shifted dramatically since then.
Oh, completely.
I mean, the layman's blog post we read alongside the study highlights just how far modern EMS devices have evolved today. We are no longer relying on the brute force square waves of the 90s, right?
Right. Modern EMS technology utilizes highly refined modulated waveforms,
Like what?
often biphasic or interferential currents. What that means is these devices can deliver the exact depolarization needed at the motor nerve while largely bypassing the sensory pain receptors on the skin's surface.
So they don't sting anymore.
Exactly. They are infinitely more precise, highly customizable, and most importantly, they are actually comfortable.
Which changes everything, because now the hardware is caught up to the biology.
Yes.
Targeted EMS has become a highly accessible tool. Like, it's no longer confined to these experimental, painful clinical trials. Patients are using comfortable, refined devices at home.
Right, as a standard part of their broader rehabilitation program.
So what does this all mean for the listener?
Well, the underlying science remains unchanged. The 1998 study proved that active, repetitive movement drives neuroplasticity. Modern engineering has simply removed the barrier to entry.
So patients can actually tolerate the repetition required to rebuild that bridge we talked about.
Exactly.
This just shifts the entire approach to early rehab. The takeaway here is grounded in realistic hope. Putting on an EMS device is not a magic switch, obviously.
No, it will not instantly restore full function to a paralyzed limb.
But the gold standard science proves that providing the nervous system with external electrical nudges genuinely supports and accelerates the brain's natural recovery processes.
Especially if it's utilized in that critical 4-week acute window.
Right. Every single muscle contraction generates sensory data, and every piece of data sent back to the brain is an opportunity for the cortex to practice, adapt, and reinforce a new pathway.
The body possesses an intense drive to move and heal. Sometimes it just requires that external intervention to break the gridlock of paralysis.
Exactly. So we started today with the physiological trap of a paralyzed limb that needs movement to heal, but cannot generate the movement itself.
The catch-22.
Right. Then we looked at how researchers in Cleveland proved that bypassing that broken internal system with external electricity could jumpstart the brain's rewiring process, literally doubling mechanical recovery.
Even if the functional tests missed it initially.
Right. We explored that measurement paradox, revealing how human adaptability can mask genuine neurological healing if we aren't using the right metrics.
Right.
And finally, we saw how the painful, crude technology of the 90s laid the biological groundwork for the comfortable, at-home neuro-rehab therapies available today.
It's a huge journey. But before we wrap up, there's one final fascinating concept buried in the discussion section of that 1998 paper.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it completely expands how we view the architecture of the human mind. The researchers referenced adjacent animal studies, specifically observing primates that had suffered localized damage to their motor cortex.
Okay, so a stroke-like injury in a primate.
Exactly. Now, when a specific area of the motor cortex dies, the limb it controls is paralyzed. The traditional understanding is that the brain just tries to route around that dead tissue.
Right, just build a detour.
But the primate studies revealed something far more dynamic. When these animals were forced into active, repetitive training of their paralyzed limb,
Using external stimulation.
it just forced repetitive movement. The brain didn't just route around the damage. The repetitive sensory motor loop actually forced functional reorganization in the adjacent, completely intact cortex.
Wait, meaning what?
Meaning areas of the brain that previously had absolutely nothing to do with controlling that limb, perhaps tissue dedicated to the shoulder or the jaw, they physically rewrote their own neural architecture to adopt the orphan function.
Oh my gosh, it just hijacked healthy, unrelated brain tissue to do a completely different job.
Yes, it fundamentally blurs the lines of biological limitation.
That is wild. I mean,
Mhm.
if targeted repetition can convince healthy, unrelated brain tissue to completely change its job description, it really forces us to wonder about the absolute limits of human potential.
It really does. It suggests the brain is far more fluid and cooperative than a static machine. We're guiding a living, highly adaptable organism as it actively evolves a new way to interact with the world.
So as we continue to refine technologies like EMS, we might not just be repairing broken pathways. We could eventually be actively mapping entirely new movement centers in the undamaged parts of the human brain.
Designing a completely new operating system for the body.
That is incredible.
Hmm.
The arm might not listen to the old commands, but the brain is sitting there, waiting, entirely capable of learning a completely new language.
It's just a matter of finding the right electrical translation to start the conversation.
Wow. Well, thank you all for joining this deep dive. Keep questioning the systems around you, keep looking for the hidden mechanics in the data, and we will catch you next time.